I'm Mark Davidson. I'm the Executive Director of Voices for Justice in Palestine. We've co-sponsored this event with Binkley. It's been a joy to work with them, and it's great to see so many of you here this morning. This panel, we'll have three panelists, a powerhouse panel of three amazing women. First up is Desmara Gatewood. I'll introduce her, and then Elise Crystal, and then Rania Masri. Each one of them will speak for about 5 minutes from their perspectives in response to Jonathan's plenary address this morning. And then Jonathan will respond to them, and we'll have some conversation, and then some concluding thoughts from Jonathan toward the end. So first up, as I said, Desmara Gatewood. Desmara is a mother, writer, and human rights activist. She was a former program director for legislative advocacy for the Coalition for Peace with Justice. Currently, Desmara works on voting rights at Democracy, North Carolina. She's a native of Durham, North Carolina. In her 2018 trip to Palestine, Desmara visited Hope Flower School and also Ahed Tamimi, which was an amazing encounter for them. Elise Crystal will speak next. Elise was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and is a longtime social justice activist and community organizer. She teaches in the English and Comparative Literature department at UNC Chapel Hill and is faculty advisor for Students for Justice in Palestine. She has worked with several grassroots national and international organizations, such as the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, USA, researching the American-Israeli Alliance, Jews for a Just Peace, Jewish Voice for Peace, North Carolina Triangle, and Demilitarize Durham to Palestine. Serves on the Academic Advisory Council for Jewish Voice for Peace, and she recently organized a Faculty for Justice in Palestine chapter at UNC Chapel Hill. And then rounding out our panel is Rania Masri. Rania is co-director of organizing and policy with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. Her activism and research have centered on anti-sanctions, anti-occupation, anti-apartheid, environmental justice, food and water sovereignty, pollution, land rights, also civil rights and voting rights. And all three of these bios are brief compared to the impact that they have had in their work. We're thrilled to have each of you here. Desmara, you're up first.
Okay, there we go. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you. It's always a blessing to be here at Binkley, to be among such scholarly, active, thoughtful people who are very serious about this work. And I think that this is a good opportunity for us to go into what are some possibilities beyond what we see. So this is a very educated audience, and even if you weren't, you had an amazing presentation where you definitely are educated at this point on what it is that is happening in Palestine, what has happened to create what is happening in Palestine, and what will happen if we do nothing. It is with that foundational understanding that I'm going to move forward and not do a lot of trying to educate and persuade you into action, but hopefully make the case for an exploration of action. So having these conversations, it's very fascinating to me where people draw the line at what they're willing to do for change. They'll say, I'm willing to go this far, but if it requires me moving beyond my comfort level, then that is where I stop. Well, I'll give you a quote from Albert Einstein, who is also very pro-Palestine, by the way.
Yes.
He said, you cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. So if we're still going with what it is we're comfortable with, then that means we are comfortable with the status quo, whether or not we want to admit it. So I want to turn you to 2018. I went on a delegation to Palestine. And one of the most impactful conversations I had was with Omar Baghouti. I think I pronounced that correctly. He is the founder of the BDS movement. The BDS movement that many of us believe is the ultimate exercise of our First Amendment rights. The BDS movement that we know is patterned off of the boycotting of South African apartheid, which was actually successful in some ways. The BDS movement that we know in many ways was patterned off of the bus boycotts in Montgomery. So we know fundamentally that the BDS movement is a peaceful, strategic way to engage people into doing something very easy, and that's not doing something, which is purchasing, investing in, and patroning certain companies. However, when I asked him, and this is what he said, you know, because sometimes we want to say, well, what do Palestinian people want? Let's follow their right to determination. But it's fascinating. Sometimes they may cross that comfort line in their solution. So I asked him very explicitly, we were going around, I was like, so what's the problem with America? Why is it that we keep messing this up? What is going on? And his exact words were, the problem in America is that you all have a two-party system. That's literally what he said. This is not from me, okay? And he said, because you cannot hold anybody accountable for anything that they do. Now, this is during the Trump administration that he's saying this. So I'm just repeating back to you what two scholars have said. The same consciousness that created a problem cannot resolve it, and the problem in America is a two-party system. So when we are faced with this question of what it is we must do, it's fascinating how some people automatically discard the idea of voting third party or abstaining or withholding their vote. And let's be clear here. Before Joe Biden is a candidate, he is the president right now of the United States. So asking of him is not hypothetical. You're asking him right now as his constituency, as the people who voted for him, to stop doing something. And I don't understand why it is preposterous to reject someone who's ignoring you on election day. Now, also you have 9 months between now and election day to make an assessment. And once you get into that booth, we will never know what you did. You just get to tell us. And it's up to you to decide that. But if someone is lying to you, if someone is actively contributing to the problem that we're all here talking about, why are we here talking about it? What's the point? We're just going to continue to spin our wheels talking about Joe Biden did this, Joe Biden did that, Joe Biden's complicit in genocide, Joe Biden is funding this. So instead of asking us, what is your solution on how to hold Joe Biden accountable? Because right now, Gallup says that the majority of Americans oppose Israel's actions. So what is it that we must do to send that message that this two-party system will not keep us in a binary of one version of genocide or another version of genocide? So that is my question to you. What does that shift in the American consciousness look like? What is it that we can do differently? Because if we continue to just go up to that line of comfort, Joe Biden knows that. He knows that, well, at the end of the day, they're still going to kind of do whatever because they don't want that guy. But push beyond that. Challenge yourself. Get creative. What is it that you can do to make it so that he does not feel guaranteed and entitled to your support as long as he is sending bombs over to Israel? So I just want to challenge you to change the American consciousness. Change that. Because if we don't, then we are going to continue to see this Democrat or another Democrat or another Democrat believe that as long as they kind of toe that line of a liberal platform, that we're willing to excuse them for a genocide. And that's what's happening right now. And so if you stand on that principle, then you think about what it means to hold someone accountable to actually living that principle themselves. And think about what you're doing that could be excusing them. Similar to Benjamin Netanyahu, we say like, oh, no, don't. We're upset with Joe Biden for telling him not to bomb people, but then we get upset because, of course, he gives him the bombs. Well, if you're going to keep saying to Joe Biden, stop bombing people, but you keep voting for him, then you got to question what mixed signals are you sending as well.
We need to talk to the media committee.
We need to talk to the media committee. Thank you. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to these amazing people who also have more insight that they can guide you into. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to carry those words from Omar and let you know that this two-party system has made it very dangerous for indigenous people in and outside of the United States.
Right.
Thank you to all again for coming. Thank you for Des for your amazing inspiration. Thank you to Mark for putting this all, well, not that he put it together all alone, but for all of you who've organized this, and of course for our guests as well, for inspiring us to move into all different kinds of, giving us a core and having us move in all different directions. I want to kind of respond to Des actually, and also to Jonathan about consistency, because I think that as I start to think more about my own politics, I feel like there may be some inconsistencies, and I could say, well, that's part of being human. But so, for example, I'm born and raised in the shadow of the Nazi Holocaust, and grew up very clear, and also like the Civil Rights Movement, anti-Vietnam War, grew up very clear that I am not a pacifist, that I believe in fighting fascism, that I believe in partisans who go out and, or even, some of the Jewish prisoners in Auschwitz blowing up the crematoria, even though it meant also killing themselves and other Jews. I supported, liberation struggles throughout the Americas and, in Vietnam, and that's just been part of my politics. And I think coming out of the panel I just came out of is sort of thinking about, how do anti-Zionist Jews sort of see this intersectionality with liberation struggles around the world? And for me, that includes supporting violent struggle, armed struggle. And I think that at the same time, where I also can get caught is, kind of thinking about, what Jonathan was talking about in terms of international law and violence against innocent civilians, and who is innocent, and how do you define that, and who has the right to resist, and where do they get their weapons from, and and then also, like, why is it okay for a state to commit violence against innocent civilians, but non-state actors are not? Like, who decided that? And so just those are all questions. I'm not going to come to a resolution about all of that, but those are kinds of things happening for me. And also thinking about international law, that it's basically consensus, right? It's not like natural. It's not like it comes from the heavens, which I'm saying that in a church, and I don't even know what that means, but, it's not just given to us like Moses' tablets, right? It's like it is a consensus among people. And it's possible that 75 years later, there's a different consensus. And maybe some of the laws that we have, or the way our international institutions are structured, no longer serve us, or maybe never did, but they certainly don't now. We, as somebody said earlier about, the UN is America or something like that. How do we reconcile the existence of these structures and these laws when no one's held accountable? Kind of what Des was just talking about accountability. I'm not recommending that we tear it all down, but I think that there might be room for reconsideration of what do we actually think is right and wrong, and more so even, how do we enforce? Because it's kind of useless, well, and maybe not completely useless, because you could always say, everyone in the world, except for Israel and Joe Biden, or Israel and the US, which has been the history of the UN since the 40s, everyone but those two rogue states feels this way or that way. So you could use it as leverage, you could use it as sort of like moral authority, but it doesn't necessarily change the facts on the ground. So just a suggestion that maybe we need to rethink how our institutions function or don't function, and what we need to do to kind of hold states accountable. And of course, I'm thinking of Israel and the US. They're not the only ones, of course, but right in this moment, in this context, that's what I'm thinking about. Also, just to add to points that Jonathan was making about, and others of us were making about, what's the motive behind this? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from the US's involvement and talking about weapons manufacturers? And just think about, they're already jumping. Saudi Arabia is already saying, well, we'll come in and we'll rebuild Gaza. The money, the profit that people will make as a result of this spreads around the world and also in the US. So you get money for destroying it, for using up all these arms and weapons that you have, and then you go in and rebuild, and more people get wealthy and get money too. And I am not in any way saying that that is the reason or the only reason or even the most important reason. It's just another reason, another piece of the financial situation. I might not have that much more to say, which is fine because Rania is so amazing that she can have whatever minutes I didn't use. But thank you all, and hopefully we'll have time to chat after. Thank you.
I keep debating how to start, so I'm just going to speak more honestly than you may be used to. A few weeks into the genocide and the massacres and the slaughters, Ali Abu Na'ma was speaking to Rifat al-Arir several weeks before he was assassinated by the Israelis. And Ali Abu Na'ma told Rifat, "Forgive us, we have failed you." And I agree with Ali completely. We, as Americans, everyone here who is an American citizen, we have all failed Palestinians. There's no question. Because nothing that Israel has done in Gaza since October 8th is new. None of it is new, and none of it is actually unexpected. This is the Zionist plan since the 1930s. Every narrative, the narratives that the Israelis presented to the world on October 8th, it's been the same narrative since the 1930s. And in 1948, when they established their supremacist, settler, colonialist, apartheid regime on our lands and captivated and imprisoned our people, they empowered that narrative. They used it against the PLO in Beirut in 1982. They've been using it against Hezbollah. They've used it against Palestinians since the 1940s. And of course, they learned from their funder, the United States, who used that narrative in every single war. We remember that logic against the Taliban in Afghanistan, against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. It's the same narrative. They're not even original. We failed the Palestinians. We failed them because when the bombs stop falling on Gaza, we get preoccupied with something else. And we seem to only remember Palestine in the midst of bloodshed. But Palestinians have been starving, they've been imprisoned, they've been raped. It's our children that were beheaded. It's our bodies that were burned. And truly, without any exaggeration, every single Zionist accusation made against Palestinians has actually been a Zionist confession of their own crimes committed against us. So let's acknowledge that we have failed the Palestinians, that we must shoulder the burden of 13,000 coffins of children. Ghassan Abu Sitta says that it's not 30,000 who've been killed. And there are others who say it's not 30,000 who've been killed, that the numbers are closer to 300,000 martyrs. So what are we going to do once we acknowledge our failure? And I mean that seriously. Once we acknowledge our failure, what are we going to do? I agree completely with what Jonathan said about the power of the narrative. And I want to recognize a few things in terms of narrative that we have to clarify, and we have to be bold. And I don't care if I am not welcome at Duke University because I have said these words. I will say them again, and I think we need to say them again and again and again. By the way, the provost in Duke University welcomed Salam Fayyad from the corrupt, treacherous, treasonous Palestinian Authority. And I say they are treasonous because it is an act of treason to coordinate and work with your military occupier, and that is the raison d'etre of the Palestinian Authority. So let's not mince words when we talk about the PA. They are not corrupt, they are traitors, which of course means they have to be corrupt, but they're beyond corrupt. So one, Israel does not have a right to self-defense. Israel is an occupying state, therefore does not legally have the right to self-defense when the people who are occupied resist against them, one. So no matter what Hamas did on October 7th, and I love, Jonathan, that you said, and I quote, it's a massively brilliant military operation. Completely agree. Israel does not have the right to self-defense. Two, Israel, like any other state, does not have an intrinsic right to exist. And as an apartheid state, Israel does not have the right to exist. So we say that blatantly. So long as the Zionist regime exists as the Zionist regime, and so long as they hold on to wanting to be a supremacist regime, then no, they do not have the right to exist. And we'll claim that narrative and say this. Where are we now? We are not only facing and have lived and are living through a genocide that is historically unprecedented. Historically unprecedented. Not only are we witnessing it, but the number of children that are being starved at the rate that they are being starved at has no historical precedence. The destruction of civilian homes at the rate and manner that they've been destroyed has no historical precedence. And the plan is to destroy all of Gaza, to make it even more unlivable. But let us remember, the United Nations 5 years ago declared Gaza unlivable. We are also witnessing a mass disabling event. And this we need to remember. The bombs will stop, but the killing will not. Because our people will not only be killed through starvation, because our agricultural lands in Gaza have been destroyed, but they will also be dying through the disabilities, the physical disabilities that are being imposed on them because of malnutrition, because of the amputations of our children at a rate of 16 children a day since October 8th, and because of all the other consequences that arise. So my question to us all is, what are we going to do about it, given that we, as American taxpayers, are financially responsible for this slaughter? We are the financiers behind it. What are we going to do about it? And I love what Des said. What are we going to do that will make us uncomfortable? This is what we need to be doing. So I urge you all to not simply do what you have been doing, but to do what you think you cannot do, because this is the difference of standing in like and standing in love. What we do for the people that we love is we do what we think we cannot do. That's how we behave with the people that we love. We find ourselves doing what we didn't think we could do. This is what we need to do today. I have lots of action ideas that I can share with you, and I urge you to organize with us further, but I'm just going to give you two. There is power in the unveiling of the US reputation as an ugly military machinery, and there is power in recognizing that we in the United States right now can defeat an incumbent president. And I love that power. There is power in recognizing that we can defeat him, that we can say, Genocide Joe, you crossed a red line, and we will not forgive you for funding this genocide, period. It will have reverberations in the policy system. The second thing that we need to do, we have shown ourselves present in Durham, we've shown ourselves present in Carborough, we've shown ourselves presence in Raleigh. We need to be taking that further, all the work that we're doing, and pushing for divestment from our churches, make sure that our churches divest from weapons, that our city councils, that our counties, not just cities, but our counties, divest from weapons and the like. Please see me, because I'm leading that effort in addition to many other organizers here. So let's continue to do that. And third, let's magnify our narrative. Jonathan said that there wasn't a counter narrative that was present. But many of us have been saying these words since the 90s. Voices haven't been heard. We need to make sure that our voices are magnified and amplified, and there are many ways to do that. But the bottom line is, let us take a commitment, a public and personal commitment, to do more than we are doing already, no matter how much we are doing, to do more, so that we can actually change what is happening and not continue. Thank you.
Very, very powerful panel, and I don't know how I can respond to some of these messages. It's more a challenge to us to get out of our comfort zone, to send a clear message to Biden, and as did Rania, and I want to dwell on that a little bit more. I also want to address what Elise said about armed struggle and nonviolence, the right to resist. I am a pacifist, but I recognize under international law, Palestinians and all oppressed people have the right to resist, including armed struggle. I also like to quote from somebody, which may surprise you, who said that if the only alternatives were violence or submission to tyranny, he would opt for violence. And you know who said that? Mahatma Gandhi. So the only justification for nonviolence is that I think in this particular case, it may be more effective than violence for a whole number of reasons I could go into. But you don't have to disagree with me. You don't have to agree with me, because none of you are about to be involved in armed resistance, I'm pretty sure. None of you are going to carry weapons or start smuggling bombs to the Palestinians. So for us here, nonviolence is almost by default the only way to resist this ongoing genocide. And there's a lot we can do nonviolently in this country, because it's this country that's supporting violence and genocide and bombs and war. The challenge for us is, though, to do it effectively by moving out of our comfort zone, by being willing to challenge a narrative that is totally embedded in our media, in our discourse, in our culture, in our institutions, and in our politics. We can no longer afford to be discussing within perimeters that have been set for us by others and by the establishment. We must be willing to break out of those perimeters. And if we are, my God, there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can do, and it goes beyond just educating and informing people. Because I think we have reached that tipping point. A majority of the people today do see the reality, do recognize that what Israel is doing is wrong, do want a ceasefire and for the killing to stop, and for Palestinians to be given access to at least a path towards freedom and human dignity. So now the task is to move from just education and enlightening others and informing others to action. And that becomes a little difficult because we are running into very powerful forces that are organized, that are well-funded, that are ruthless in attacking individuals and reputations and professions, that have no problem lying and smearing anybody who dares speak truth to them. Now, when we move in that direction, we will find that there are tools for us to use. One of them is international law and human rights. One of them is political action, challenging our leaders, challenging our institutions, our churches, our city councils, our state representatives, all of whom are currently complicit in the evil that's taking place. Something as simple as divesting from Israel bonds, which is literally money being given to the state of Israel to buy weapons and to carry out its genocide. Do you know how many cities and states and unions and churches and pension funds actually buy Israel bonds as openly as that? To be able to divest from these things, to be able to confront these institutions and demand that they live up to what they claim they believe in. To really work for, if you believe in reconciliation, if you believe in dialogue, and if you believe in diplomacy, at a minimum, start recognizing Palestine. Start talking to Hamas. You remember when the PLO was the big terrorist organization, it was illegal to talk to them, and Andrew Young lost his position at the United Nations for even talking to Zehdi, the representative of the PLO. And when churches were at the forefront of those who broke the law and went and started talking to the PLO and to Yasser Arafat. And they didn't agree with him. They talked to him and says, you need to change the charter. You need to think about different ways other than armed struggle. You need to talk to Israelis. You need to start a process, which ended up being horrible, but never mind. That process of breaking the taboo against speaking with the PLO should be done now with Hamas. I challenge you all. You need to break that taboo and end the demonization of Hamas and start talking to them. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to adopt their ideology or philosophy, but you need to talk to them. How else can you deal with Gaza? One of the reasons, by the way, why October 7 occurred is because for 16 years, we all were complicit in the policy of ignoring Hamas, not talking to them. And if you ignore Hamas, you also ignore Gaza. And the Israelis were continuously squeezing Gaza, and Netanyahu was very pleased because for him that was the way to continue the fragmentation of the Palestinians. You want me to talk to the Palestinians? Who are the Palestinians? They can't even agree among themselves. There is Ramallah, Fatah, and there's Hamas in Gaza, and until they get their act together, there's nobody to talk to. Exactly, that was, and we were all complicit in that policy of refusing to talk to Hamas and therefore ignoring Gaza until Gaza blew up. I said, oh my God, what happened? where did this come from? It's as if it was like it came out of nowhere. No, it was the direct result of an ongoing policy in which we were all, I think, in one way or another, complicit. But we are now at a major turning point. We can, in fact, start thinking about things and thinking about them in a new way, which is, I think, the last section. Do we move right into it, or do we have some discussion here first?
Let's take a minute if any of you would like to respond to what Jonathan has said. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to, with all due respect, I don't think this is about talking with Hamas, which again is as an arm. For the terrible Oslo agreement, it wasn't about talking with the PLO. It's not about negotiating with Palestinians. I refuse to sit across the table with an Israeli. It doesn't make sense to do that. It is about talking about liberation. Do you support liberation for Palestinians? Do you support equality for Palestinians? Then work for the implementation of US national laws which dictate that the United States cannot, according to US national laws, send weapons to countries, not even convicted, countries that may use the weapons to commit human rights violations. What more do we need than the ICJ passing provisionary measures calling Israel guilty of plausible genocide? I mean, it worries me when we want to bring a Palestinian partner to the table and then bringing others. There's none of us that work within Palestinian communities or that are Palestinian, none of us have the power to sit at a table right now. The power to negotiate comes after you have proven yourself to be powerful. And it becomes our responsibility as those who are in solidarity with Palestinian liberation is to empower every Palestinian partner, regardless what we might think about them, with the exception of the Palestinian Authority, to be strong enough so that when the time comes for us to be negotiating, which is nowhere near now, that Palestinians will be strong enough to negotiate. But right now, it's not about talking with Hamas, with all due respect, Jonathan. Right now, it is about talking about national laws and international laws and getting those who support genocide, including Deborah Ross and Valerie Fouchi, out of Congress, including the Biden administration, out of the White House, and getting good people in their stead from the city council up to the top. It's about liberating the United States from Zionism. It's about liberating our churches from Zionism. It's about liberating our synagogues in the United States from Zionism. That is where I would love for us to be pushing our efforts and to be thinking, again, when the bombs stop falling on Gaza, take a commitment that you will not forget about Gaza, because our activism in the United States has ebbed and flowed. We remember Gaza when there's bombing, and we seem to forget when there's siege, and we just turn aside and forget about them. So make a promise right now that you will not forget about Gaza when the bombs stop. Commit to that.
Free the United States.
Free the United States.
I think the time is now to recognize the state of Palestine. This administration talks about a two-state solution. If they recognize the state of Palestine, then the occupation will cease, will stop. So I think that's a very good point, and it will bring the two parties to, all the steps will fall behind. The two parties will get together for a one-state solution, because the two states is impossible. It's a what you call scrambled eggs, and you cannot unscramble back again.
Yeah, Rani, I want to make it clear that when I was talking about talking to Hamas, I was talking about breaking a taboo that needs to be broken, about changing a narrative that needs to be changed. And many times we have to take steps along the way to victory. We can't wait till victory happens and then we talk. One of the important elements of working in solidarity with Palestinians is to break this delegitimization, part of which is the taboo against talking to Hamas. I don't think talking to Hamas by itself is going to lead to liberation. But if you don't talk to Hamas, talking about liberation is almost irrelevant, because if the goal expressed by everybody is the utter and complete destruction of Hamas, then we are playing in a certain play field that has been set for us within certain perimeters that exclude the Palestinian people, that exclude the resistance movement. And unless we bring them into the picture, into the playing field, it may feel good to just talk to ourselves and wait till liberation comes before we start negotiating, before we start talking. But we have a number of very difficult steps to take, and one of them in this country, one of them is changing the narrative. And to change the narrative, we have to re-legitimize Palestinian resistance, including Hamas. And I'm saying that as a person who's a pacifist. I'm saying we need to give legitimacy to the Palestinian resistance and to the Hamas movement, with which I ideologically disagree, by the way. This is part of an ongoing process.
Could I add something to that? It was my honor this last week to be one of the readers in the public reading that takes place every year at the Peace and Justice Plaza in Chapel Hill of Dr. Martin Luther King's Riverside sermon, which he preached on April 4th. And hearing it read again, I was really struck that he was saying, as he was breaking his silence about Vietnam, it's a very sophisticated analysis of the freedom struggle in Vietnam. And one of the things that comes through in that is, if we're going to work for the liberation of the Vietnamese people, we need to talk to the resistance forces, and that needs to be part of our calculus. And it wasn't part of the calculus. And King, in that sense, was saying there'll never be a new day in these issues until we bring everybody to the table and we listen to their aspirations for freedom, their critique of power. So I think it was just interesting that King was pointing in that same direction.
So I think one of the beauties of me being only newly informed on this issue is that I enter it from a very simple lens. And I hear things, and sometimes I feel like, wow, this is getting a little over my head. However, they are very necessary conversations to have. But I think about it as, if I'm a 7-year-old in Gaza right now, right? And someone mentions Hamas to me, if someone mentions a two-state solution to me, if someone mentions the PLO to me, if someone mentions the Palestinian Authority, and I'm a 7-year-old in Gaza, and I'm fighting for my life at this moment, everything else after today is an aspiration. But what we do know is that whether or not we ever get the chance to talk to Hamas, they are killing Palestinians with ammunition that we are paying for. And so that is very simple to me. The United States should stop funding tear gas canisters that are being picked up off of playgrounds. That's very simple. And what I think about also is when I think about how the Black Panthers started, how the Grape Street Crips started, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, they're so violent. Well, they were also responding to police coming in and raiding their neighborhoods and killing them. And so to say, I'm going to go to Huey Newton and try to talk him down and see what he wants, he's going to say my movement would not exist. If they were already, I wouldn't have to do a free lunch, free breakfast program if they were not depriving children of the resources they need. I wouldn't have to stand here with my rifle if police weren't going to come in and shoot me. I wouldn't have to sit here and preach this radical agenda if there was a way that I could just exist in the world as a black person without this. So I think sometimes we forget that this actually is pretty simple. If you stop bombing the Palestinian people, I promise you, a lot of the resistance you see from Palestinians either coming to the table or wanting to listen to you, or they want to be violent or nonviolent, those wouldn't exist. Because they are doing this because they are in occupied territory. And the occupation is illegal. The United Nations has said this is illegal. So you can't have someone who's doing illegal activity and then keep trying to press the victim into being reasonable. This is fight or flight response. When you feel threatened, you're either going to flee or you're going to fight for your life. And that's what they're doing. Now, if you think you should maybe think about it, sometimes people can't be philosophical when there are bombs raining down on their neighborhoods. They don't have the luxury to sit back and read a Bible verse or from Jesus. And by the way, I love Jesus and I do read Bible verses. But I do realize that if people are coming at me and trying to kill my parents and my child, then I don't know. It might get a little different right then. So we just have to take into consideration that we're not just dealing with people and their executive processing system. We're talking about straight up limbic system, straight up reptilian instinct to defend yourself and your family. Everything else that happens after that is almost an aspiration. But here's also what's very interesting. We're getting to a point where Americans are saying that they believe what Israel is doing is wrong. Okay, that's interesting. So now that we've gotten to the what, kind of, or kind of a description of the what, we have to name it. It is genocide. That's what's happening. And why do genocides happen? Because you want to wipe them out of what you believe is yours. And in this case, it's their land. They're trying to take their land. And you can make this very simple. The resurgence of the KKK wasn't just about racism. It's they were driving black people off of their land. The colonial settlers here weren't just saying we don't like Native Americans because they're not Christian. They wanted their land. So we can make this very simple. They want their land, and they're doing it by killing them, by home demolitions, by taking them over, through ethnocentrism, through racism, through propaganda. That's what you're seeing, okay? And until we stop bombing these people, everything else is secondary. We have to start there. We can't keep putting the cart before the horse. You have to stop killing them. That's it. Let's see what happens. Let's test it out. Stop bombing them. And then let's see what happens after that. But we don't even have that reality. We've been doing it, since Nakba. You have people here who have no memory of what Palestine looks like, not under siege. So you're asking people to look at a version of the Middle East that does not exist and has never existed for them. So if you want to bring negotiators to the table, they have to at least be alive. They might be dead. So I'm just saying, at some point we can get back to just regular logic that any child will tell you. You should not kill someone else. That's wrong. You should not fund someone killing someone else. That's wrong too. And if you are trying to kill someone else, then you should have a little bit of mercy in how they respond to you actively trying to take everything that is theirs. So just keep that in mind as we are talking through this and as we are trying to get Americans to act. They have to understand the urgency of today, that people may not survive beyond today. And that will be possibly a different case if we stop sending bombs. That is it. The Palestinian people have no burden to do anything as far as I'm concerned. Nothing. It is on them to decide how to survive. It is on us to decide how to stop killing them.
Thank you very much. That was very powerful. And many times I use the metaphor when we talk about ceasefire now and end the killing. And allow food and water in. Basically, we're saying, get your knee off my neck. I can't breathe. I am being strangled. I am being killed. So the immediate task is stop it. End it. Don't send bombs. Allow the food in. Allow the water in. Stop the destruction. Stop the killing. That is an immediate physical, existential need. And I think we have enough change in this country to bring that about now. But that's only the first step. That's the immediate task. And if we can't even get that, I mean, to talk about something else is almost utopian. But once we do that, and I think we can, I think we are close to being able to finish that.
Oh, and I just wanted to clarify when I was saying that, I was saying also defund Israel, like stop sending them money, period. Like
Yeah.
that's what I meant,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Once we do that, then we still have the problem. What do we do with this Israel, with this Zionist movement, with this attempt to take over Palestine and make it Jewish? What do we do with the realities on the ground of their having successfully, during the first Nakba, pushed out most of the people of Palestine and destroyed their villages, and now almost successfully totally destroyed Gaza and pushed the people, hopefully not out, but certainly constrained them into a very, very, very tight area? How do we move from that towards peace, towards life, towards existence? And here's where I think I dare to say we have some good news. Some good news. And it's a difficult message to even see, because we're in the Easter season now. Anthony Campolo used to, 40 years ago, I heard him, and he gave a message where he was talking about it is Friday, but Sunday is coming. The Palestinian people today are living through Friday. Their master is on the cross. Their people are scattered. The Palestinian people are fragmented. They have no leadership. They are cut up into different pieces. There are those who are Israeli citizens living under Israeli apartheid. There are those in Jerusalem, resident but not citizen. There are those under direct military occupation in the West Bank with a collaborationist leadership that's serving the Israelis. And even they are being squeezed into area A, B, and C. There are those in Gaza who are being systematically genocide. There are those in the diaspora who have the right to return. So the Palestinian people are really living through one of the most difficult periods of their history. Their supposed friends in the Arab world doing nothing. Sometimes we think of them even worse than their enemies. The international community paralyzed and stymied into doing nothing other than, well, maybe we'll airdrop a few meals by parachute on you. Horrible situation. But Sunday is coming. There will be a resurrection. The one quality of the Palestinian people that has not been destroyed is their resilience, their sumud. Amazing resilience. Against all odds, we are still alive and well, and we will survive this. We definitely will. Mundar Ishaq gave a sermon where he said, you know, Palestinians will survive. The question is about the rest of you. Will the international system survive? Will international law survive? Will the concept of humanity survive? Will equality survive? Will Israeli Jews survive with any semblance of humanity left? Or will they just be monsters, hating even themselves and incapable of surviving as human beings? And this is the message that we have, the Easter message. The message of life, the message of resurrection, the message of a new reality in which we as a people can and will live and survive and thrive. And thrive. And the lesson to all of us, or the question to all of us is, how will we as Americans, as Christians, if you are Christians, or Jews, if you are Jews, or Muslims, if you are Muslim, or human beings, if you believe in humanity and in human rights and in an international order and in a world where we can, in fact, live in dignity as equals. This is really the message for us, and this is the challenge. And it's not easy, because there are very powerful forces lined up against us to prevent us from doing it. Now, according to the program, I'm also supposed to give in these concluding remarks maybe a little bit of a commercial. I have written a book called Beyond the Two-State Solution. I know that the conventional wisdom is that the two-state solution is the only path forward. I don't believe it anymore. There was a time when I thought it was possible, but it's not possible anymore. We need to think of a new paradigm, of a new reality in Israel and Palestine that addresses the need of all Palestinians from the river to the sea, including the right of return, but that also addresses the needs of Israeli Jews, who for whatever reason, however fair or unfair, are now living in that land and consider it their home. There's 7 million of them. Never mind their power and their nuclear weapons and their technology and their wealth and their experience of what they went through. This is the reality in Palestine today. There's two groups living there, and they must find a way to live together. The old thinking can no longer work. The idea of Zionism and creating a Jewish state as Jewish as France is French cannot work anymore. I will even dare to say that the old idea of Palestine Arabiya doesn't work anymore either, because there's 7 million non-Arabs living in Palestine today, and they're going nowhere. They're living there. Can we think of a new reality of a single state that is both Arab and Jewish, that fulfills the needs of both groups to live in dignity and equality and humanity? So I wrote this little book called Beyond the Two-State Solution. You can download it for free or you can buy it. One of the beautiful things about it is it has a little executive summary at the back. So if you don't have time to read the whole book, start by reading the executive summary. And if you like it, hopefully you can read the whole book. It's available. And when I wrote this book, and I thought it was just an exercise, what do Jews really want? Jewish Zionists, that is. Why do they want a Jewish state? What's in it for them? What does it promise them? And why do Palestinians want a state? Yeah, we want a passport so we can travel. We want a parliament so we can participate in ruling ourselves. We want an airport so we can fly out and in. And we want a state so we can bring in our cousins and relatives who are living in exile anytime they want to return. So a state is only a tool for us. So if we can get a state that gives us what we need, and if that state can give the Jews what they need without being exclusive, without dominating the others, without negating or criminalizing or demonizing or disenfranchising or simply killing and pushing them off, maybe it's possible. So I wrote this little book. And then somebody said, you know, there's something missing in it. It's a nice idea. It's a bit utopian, you know, and visionary. But what's your story? How did you come to this idea? I said, well, my story is really interesting. I have a lot of very fun things to tell you about my story. And so I began to collect the little vignettes, the stories of how I came to this position, how I came to accept nonviolence as a useful tool, how I came to believe in dealing with the situation not through violence but through human rights, international law, dealing with the others, dealing with the settlers, dealing with the corruption in Palestinian society, dealing with the Bible, dealing with my own faith. And so I wrote this other book called The Truth Shall Set You Free, which is also available in audio if you like to just listen to it. So these two books are available in the back, and I think we can do some signing after this session. But I also, and with this I will finish, I'm also involved with FOSNA, Friends of Sabeel North America. It's a Christian group, but it's a group that believes also in liberation, in justice, that the Bible is a source for justice, not for oppression of other people, which it has been used in this country particularly through Christian Zionism. The Bible has been used as a weapon against justice for Palestinians. So FOSNA is this other organization. And if you like, I will put all your names and addresses. Maybe I can get them from this conference. Put you on our mailing list. And if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe. Very easy. Delete. Because every week I write something that tries to address the current situation, and you may like that. So instead of having a sign-up sheet at the back, I'll just get the names of all of you, and again, you can unsubscribe if you don't like it. Yes, please.
So in the packet, you have a little brochure.
Yes, there's a brochure if you have other friends. And by the way, it is important to reach out to others. We really need to widen the circle. We need to reach out to our Jewish brothers and sisters in this country who are living a huge crisis because they don't like what's going on there, but at the same time, they are afraid of anti-Jewishness and anti-Semitism. And they need to be brought in to see that there is a possibility of hope beyond Netanyahu and Zionism and destruction and death, that you can be embraced. We need to reach out to evangelicals in this country who have been duped by Christian Zionism into thinking that it's their Christian duty to support settlements and weapons and support the state of Israel. We need to reach out to people outside our comfort zone and bring them into the conversation for a new and a better reality that encloses and encompasses and embraces rather than cuts off and pushes away and destroys relationships. We have a challenge, and it's a good challenge. We can be on the side of goodness, on the side of peace, on the side of life rather than death. This is the challenge before us.
On that note, join me in thanking our panelists and as Jonathan mentioned, he'll be at the back table for book signing, and we encourage you to share with each other information about how we can continue this movement. It is not only a conversation, it's a movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this church and the organizer of this conference.